Welcome back, everyone, to the grand finale of this season of Are We Fucked? The podcast where we ask the big questions like, are we alone in the universe? Or are aliens just ghosting us because we're not cute enough? I'm your host, Lisa Camillo, anthropologist and filmmaker, and part-time space cadet. We've saved one of our absolute best for last. Today, we have a cosmic level guest joining us. Get ready because things are about to get out of this world. Avi Loeb is the Frank Baird Jr. Professor of Science at Harvard. He is also a best-selling author and world-renowned astrophysicist, and a guy who asked the questions we've all secretly wondered. Where the hell are the aliens? And why haven't they stopped by to say hi? Is Earth not on their intergalactic Tinder swipe list? Jokes aside, we will dive deep into the mysteries of the cosmos and ask the question on everyone's mind. Are aliens coming to save us from self-destructing, or just kindly euthanize us? Avi has written over 1,000 scientific papers on everything from black holes to the first stars. And he's the director of Harvard's Galileo project, which, no big deal, is focusing on, you guessed it, alien stuff. He's also on Time's list of the 25 most influential people in space, which is basically like winning the Oscars, but for astrophysicists. So today, we're diving into aliens, UAPs, and that weird space rock, Oumuamua, that Avi is convinced might be more than just a space pebble. We'll also discuss the US government's obsession with hiding the truth about Area 51 and the question that keeps us all up at night. If aliens did create us, how the heck did they do it? Buckle up, listeners, because this episode is going interstellar. Hello, Dr. Loeb, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to have you on the show. You are amazing. And I've been a fan since I was a kid of alien intelligence. My dad passed me on to his passion for astronomy, even though he's not an astronomer.
Well, another way to think about it is if you read politics every day, you realize that there is a lot of room for improvement for our own human intelligence. We are clearly not at the top of the food chain that we can imagine. And of course, some people may think that the artificial intelligence, our own technological kids, may at some point replace us and do better than us. But I'm actually waiting for a visit by a more intelligent neighbor.
Same, actually. So, okay, let's start with the most basic question and then we build from that. Are we alone in this universe?
I think it's very unlikely. In fact, it's pretentious of us to argue that we are the smartest civilization that ever existed since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. First, we see hundreds of billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, like the Sun, and a significant fraction of them, a quarter perhaps, have a planet the size of the Earth, roughly at the same separation. But most of the stars formed billions of years before the Sun. They had a lot of history before we came to the scene. And we just arrived in the last few million years, the human species on Earth. And we also know since the days of Copernicus and Galileo that we are not at the center of the universe. So if you arrive to a play, in this case, the cosmic play, at the end of the play, and you are not at the center of stage, the play is not about you. And we have a hard time accepting that. And so a lot of my colleagues argue that it's an extraordinary claim to suggest that there might have been extraterrestrials more intelligent than we are. They say it requires extraordinary evidence for us to believe it. And in fact, even Elon Musk argues we have responsibility to go to Mars and spread ourselves in order to avoid a single planet catastrophe because we might be alone. And my point is that this is very arrogant to actually believe that.
Agreed.
It's extraordinary to believe that we are unique and special. And in fact, given so many rolls of the dice on hundreds of billions of other planets, it's very likely that there is something better than us. Now, they may not be alive at this time. They may have died by now because their star evolved and brightened like the sun will do in a billion years. And by the way, the sun will boil off all the oceans on Earth, and the Earth will become a desert, just like Mars, in a billion years. But that doesn't mean that there won't be probes in interstellar space representing us. I see them as monuments, and therefore we should do astrophysical archaeology in the sense of looking for any remnants, any relics left behind by those that came before us. And, Elon Musk, for example, launched the Tesla Roadster car in 2018
Yeah, I remember that.
as a dummy payload on the Falcon Heavy, and now it's on an elliptic orbit around the sun. And there may be a lot of interstellar cars out there. I'm just suggesting that he might not be the most accomplished space entrepreneur since the Big Bang.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I don't think we're alone. We have such a huge universe. It's just hard even to comprehend how big it is. So to think that we're alone, it's a little bit silly, but everybody are entitled to their own opinions. It's funny, though, that they can believe in angels and
or extra dimensions. Even if you look at the mainstream of physics, there is a speculation about extra dimensions that, the mainstream of theoretical physics explored over the past 50 years. And you might ask, why is that acceptable as a mainstream idea?
Yeah.
And imagining that something like us exists in circumstances similar to what we have here on Earth in so many other places. Why is that considered to be controversial? And I just cannot understand that. I should also mention, since you have an Italian accent, that, Enrico Fermi was the Italian physicist, was the first to suggest the question, where is everybody? Because he had lunch in Los Alamos and he just didn't see any aliens around there at the time. Once again, that is the question that every single person asks. Where is everybody? And what you tell a single person that cannot find a partner is, you are not that attractive. You shouldn't expect that everyone will come to you where you are at the time that you're expecting them to approach you. They may not even realize that you're lonely. And what you need to do is at least look through the windows or leave your home and go to dating sites. That's the trick for finding a partner. And so, for us to argue there is nobody out there without seeking the evidence, without looking for them, without putting I'm talking about billions of dollars in searching for them. Why billions of dollars? Because that's the amount of money we invested in the search for dark matter. And the search for dark matter will not change our life. However, if we find a partner in interstellar space, it's just like finding a partner in our life. It could change the meaning of our existence. It will make us feel less lonely. We could learn from that partner. This is the most romantic question in science, and yet there is not much funding dedicated to it.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny. I never thought that Dr. Loeb could actually give dating advice, but if you're out there, listen to him to find a partner. But yes, it's true. We should, because it's fascinating. And also, the technology might help us perhaps combat the challenges of climate change one day if we can decide on doing something about it right now.
Well, there are many benefits. For example, suppose we find evidence that there were a large number of civilizations that perished by now, because we will find some technological signatures that indicate that they existed at some time. We'll find where the gadgets came from. And when we look at that planet, we will realize that it's now dead. There is nothing on it. And then the question is why? And it could be that it's the result of a catastrophe that they didn't prevent. Of course, if the star itself evolves and creates a catastrophe, that's sort of predictable. But any intelligent civilization should prepare for that. And there should be some mass exodus. I mean, the way I think of it is like Noah's spaceship. In the biblical story, Noah built an ark to put animals in it to avoid the great flood. And you can think of this as a metaphor to what we need to do in order to avoid the next big catastrophe. It could be an asteroid impact, or it could be the sun brightening, or it could be climate change. But at any event, there is an opportunity to learn about science and technology that we don't possess, because they may have knowledge that represents our future. And frankly, I think we are likely to find the artificial intelligence systems, not necessarily biological creatures that are visiting us. And of course, that would be a challenge for our own AI systems to figure out their extraterrestrial AI systems.
Wow, you just blew my mind thinking about Noah's Ark, and it could be a metaphor of a spaceship. Perhaps they created us. Another intelligence created us and planted in this earth to escape another disaster that it happened to them.
Well, that is a completely possible thing. I call it an interstellar gardener that seeded life on Earth. It's possible. We don't know much about what happened on Earth at very early times. Documented written history is 5,000 years old, and there are lots of transitions that the Earth went through before that that are not fully understood. For example, 252 million years ago, there was a global warming event, very sudden. Some people argue perhaps shorter than tens of thousands of years. By geological terms, it's very short, and it's unclear what triggered that. And there was also an oxidation era a couple of billion years ago. Oxygen did not exist in the atmosphere. And we don't know whether those major events in the evolution of life on Earth were triggered by a visit, or, we have no clue, because the geological mixing of the surface of the Earth with the interior erased any clues like that. So we don't know how life arrived here and whether it was planted by a gardener. And one thing we can think about is that even if there was one civilization in the entire galaxy that was able to produce self-replicating probes, these are probes that are able to replicate themselves because they may have a 3D printer in addition to AI, and then they go and visit places and use the raw materials that they find to produce a copy of themselves. You might say, well, that's very futuristic, but no, it's actually something that nature on Earth is using. If you imagine the dandelion flower, the seeds of the flower are carried by the wind. There is no umbilical cord connecting the seeds to the flower. There is no radio transmission. The flower doesn't give instructions to the seeds. They just carry the DNA and they look for, and they get planted, and hopefully they find fertile ground and reproduce the DNA of the flower. And that's the way that the flower spreads and multiplies. And if you translate that to technology, you can imagine self-replicating probes. And even if one galaxy decided to do that, within 1 billion years with chemical rockets, you can fill up interstellar space with such probes.
Easy.
So we just need to search for them. And only over the past decade, we were able to find objects, large objects from outside the solar system. Before that, we only found dust, tiny particles that are obviously natural in origin.
Are you referring to, and I'm sorry for my pronunciation, my Hawaiian pronunciation, Oumuamua? Is that it close enough?
Yeah, so that was exactly. This is an object that was roughly the size of a football field, discovered on October 19th, 2017 by an observatory in Hawaii, and was given this name because it means scout in the Hawaiian language. The first object that came from afar. And it was very strange, this object. First, it was not expected. I wrote a paper a decade before forecasting that there shouldn't be enough rocks of this size, 100 meters, coming from other stars for us to see one of them with the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii. And the fact that we found it means that if these are rocks, there are many more than we expect based on what we know about the solar system, maybe a factor of 100 more. And beyond that, this object, as it was tumbling, it changed the reflection of sunlight by a factor of 10 from its surface. And that meant that it had a very extreme shape, most likely flat, pancake-like. And it was also pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force, because it was mysterious because there was no evaporation, no cometary tail, no dust or gas around it.
So it was nothing normal or organic sort of thing?
Yeah, usually we see a push from the rocket effect of comets that are getting propelled by the evaporation of gas from one end of them that faces the sun. But in this case, there wasn't any evaporation detected. So the question was, what is pushing this object? And I suggested it's the reflection of sunlight. And indeed, 3 years later, there was another object discovered by the same telescope in Hawaii that was pushed by reflecting sunlight, no cometary tail visible, and it ended up being a rocket booster that was launched by NASA in 1966. It was given the name 2020 SO. And in that case, it's clear that, it had thin walls, and that's why it had a large surface area for its mass, so that it can be pushed by reflecting sunlight. And, it was technological in origin. So to me, it sounds completely reasonable that Oumuamua could have been a surface layer that was torn apart of something bigger, or maybe a broken piece of a Dyson sphere, a megastructure around another star, but not natural in origin. And we couldn't get enough information about it. But the good news is that next year, in 2025, there will be a new observatory in Chile called the Rubin Observatory that will survey the southern sky every 4 days with a camera that has 3.2 billion pixels, 1,000 times more pixels than your cell phone. And there is a good chance that it will find an Oumuamua-like object every couple months because it's much more sensitive than telescope in Hawaii. So we can learn more about this population. And the fascinating question is whether among the rocks that we find from interstellar space, every now and then we might see some space trash from another civilization. Just like plastics in the ocean, such trash keeps accumulating in the Milky Way over time. And their trash is our treasure because it will allow us to learn about them. You know, if we find a tennis ball from the neighbor's yard, we would know that the neighbor plays tennis.
True.
But this is just one object. I should say that 4 years before that, there was a meteor that collided with Earth and was moving really fast. In fact, it was moving faster than 95% of the stars outside the solar system. And it exploded over the Pacific Ocean. And the US government satellites detected it. And I decided to lead an expedition in June 2023, a year ago, to the Pacific Ocean to collect materials from that explosion site. And we found materials that have a composition that is not represented by solar system materials. And that's very exciting. And we are planning to go again, maybe, and collect bigger pieces of this object, because that would allow us to find out whether it was natural or artificial in origin. So far, what we found are molten droplets that show this unusual composition, but the nature of the object is unclear as of yet. The one other exotic property, or I should say anomalous property of this meteor, was that it exploded in the lower atmosphere, 20 kilometers over the ocean surface. Just for comparison, there was another meteor that appeared a couple of months ago over Spain and Portugal, moving roughly at the same speed, but it exploded at an altitude of 70 kilometers, where the air density is 1,000 times lower. And so that shows that the material strength of the interstellar meteor was 1,000 times bigger than this one, the more recent one. And in fact, it was tougher than all other documented meteors in the NASA catalog. So the question is, why was it such an unusual object? Could it be a car, or could it be a Voyager-like meteor? Imagine our own spacecraft colliding with another planet. It would exhibit unusual material strength because it's not a rock.
Wow. So all these could be fragments or some sort of interstellar cars of extraterrestrial life. That's what is the hypothesis.
Well, that's what I'm looking for. It's a lot of work to collect the materials from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. It's about 2 kilometers deep, and the region that was localized by the US Department of Defense was about 11 kilometers on the side. So we went back and forth 26 times with a magnetic sled, a sled with magnets, to collect the magnetic particles from the ocean floor. And that so far we found those tiny particles that were melted off during the explosion that are less than a millimeter in size. They are really like particles of sand. But we hope to go again in the coming year. The expedition will cost $6.5 million. So we're now seeking a donor that will provide us with the funds. We already have a ship, and we will use a robot, a remotely operated vehicle that will be placed on the ocean floor and will give us a video feed that could allow us to see what we are picking up in real time, and hopefully we'll find bigger pieces in that region.
Wow, I hope so. This is very exciting, even though there is nothing left for us to know the technology.
It's not clear because maybe among the wreckage, if it was a technological object, we might find the core of the object. We might find a gadget with buttons on it. And then the question is, should we press a button? And I asked the students in my class, what do they think? And half of them said, no, please don't press any button because it will affect all of us. And the other half of the class said, please do. We are very curious to know, if it's ChatGPT 100, maybe it can answer some difficult questions for us. And then one student said, given the split vote, what would you actually do, Professor Loeb? And I said, don't worry about it. I'll bring it to a laboratory and examine it before engaging with it.
Yeah, let's hope so. Make the right choice, Professor. So I guess the question is, I've been to Nevada and there is Area 51. They say there is already the US looking into alien technology because they captured already something. Is it true? Do you know any intel?
Well, yeah, so exactly a year ago, there was a testimony in the US Congress given by David Grush, and that is exactly the claim that he made under oath. He said that there are programs within the US government of retrieval and reverse engineering of materials from crash sites of extraterrestrial objects, technological objects. And I spoke with him for an hour and I asked him for specific details or evidence. And he says that he makes this statement based on conversations that he had with 40 people within government. And in fact, he may have seen some direct evidence, but he doesn't provide this evidence because he says that there are legal reasons for that. If he were to disclose those details, he might be put in jail. So he's not willing to do that at the moment. As a result, as a scientist, I cannot really tell whether he's telling the truth or not. And then there is the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in the Pentagon that was established in response to the reports from the Director of National Intelligence to the US Congress about these unidentified anomalous phenomena. And the former director of that office told me that he had access to all the information, and as far as he can tell, there is nothing of significance. 97% of the objects from the past he was able to figure out and explain, and the remaining 3% do not have good enough data to say anything. From a point of view of a scientist, obviously, there are many objects in the sky that can confuse us, that are human-made or natural. And even if 1 in a million is from outside the solar system, that would be big news for humanity. So we shouldn't expect the US government to tell us what lies outside the solar system, because their day job is national security. My day job is what lies beyond the solar system. So my hope is that if they have any such information or materials, that they would share it with scientists like myself, because it's a matter of science, not a matter of government or national security. And everyone should be aware of that. It's possible they don't have anything, and that's why they're not sharing it. It's also possible that at least the latest data is not shared just because it's collected by sensors that the US government doesn't want adversarial countries to be aware of. But I cannot decide between two possibilities, that this is a false narrative injected by government to confuse people. So if they see something in the sky that is actually new technologies used by the military, they would be confused and say it's UFOs, and people would just dismiss it. So it's useful for the government to introduce this false narrative maybe. But alternatively, it may well be that they have something they cannot figure out. At the moment, I cannot decide between the two, but I established the Galileo project that I'm leading at Harvard University. We have an observatory that is monitoring the sky all the time, 24/7. By now, over the past 6 months, we collected data on 500,000 objects. We looked at it. So far, we haven't seen anything anomalous. But it's just near Boston, and we're planning to make copies of this observatory, place one of them in Colorado and another one in Pennsylvania. We received $600,000 from the Richard King Mellon Foundation to build an observatory in Pennsylvania. One possibility is that we will place limits on the appearance of unidentified anomalous phenomena, because nobody before this survey of the sky that the Galileo project is doing, nobody did a systematic study over a period of months and months. That is really important, because then you recognize all the objects that appear in the sky routinely as noise, And if something anomalous shows up, you know how rare it is, how unusual it is. So if we don't see anything anomalous, we can put a limit on the rate of such things. And if we do see one, we will definitely write an article, a scientific paper on it, and let the public know. So my hope is to bring this subject into the mainstream of scientific research, rather than waiting for the government to tell us what's in the sky. The sky is not classified. The oceans are not classified. So we should be able to do this research scientifically.
And the whole humanity needs to know. It's
Right.
our right.
Yeah, you might wonder why astronomers are not seeing it in their data. The point is that the telescopes that were built until now were focused on a small part of the sky at any given time. And they were ignoring objects that fly overhead. So the observatory that we had to build was never built before. That's why it took us 3 years to do it.
That's very exciting. So, talking about the governments or different governments, how do you think humanity would react to full contact with extraterrestrial life? Would we embrace it or shoot it down?
Well, I think it will become viral, obviously. And I think we need this piece of news because as of now, we are dedicating $2.4 trillion to military budgets worldwide. About $1 trillion of that amount is invested in the US. That's the defense bill. And that's a lot of money just for conflicts and killing each other.
It's terrible.
Makes very little sense. It's not the intelligent thing to do. And you might sing a song like John Lennon arguing, imagine all the people living in peace. But, I cannot live under the illusion that people will suddenly decide to avoid conflicts. And the only way I can see this changing is if we get a message from outer space that will change our perspective. We would suddenly realize that we are fighting over limited territories on this piece of rock that was left over from the formation of the sun, and there is much more real estate out there. And it's really ridiculous of us to have these zero-sum games and kill each other and engage in conflicts, and instead we should all feel as if we are in the same boat, the Earth, sailing through space. So we should collaborate and work together. This is the messianic message that many religions talked about. When the Messiah will arrive, peace and prosperity will come to Earth. And the Messiah is envisioned as someone that used to be on Earth, or the way I see it is the messianic message will arrive from another star.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
We would suddenly, if you think about our science, let's say 1,000 years from now, we might be able to understand how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, something that we cannot do at the moment. We don't know what happened before the Big Bang, when the universe started. But if we are able to have quantum gravity understanding that makes predictions, we might figure out that it's possible to understand how the universe came to exist. And at that point, we might have a recipe for creating a baby universe. So what that means is that we could apply at that point in time, we could apply for the job description of God. I mean, if you ask yourself, what is the biggest requirement in the job description of God? It's you should be able to create a universe.
Wow.
So if we have quantum gravity engineers that are capable of creating the conditions that will give birth to a baby universe, that would represent getting to that status and being able to apply for the job of God. Another civilization that is more than 1,000 years more advanced than we are could have figured it out, and we might find them. And they would be an approximation to the traditional description of God in religious texts. And we will find them in reality. I mean, if we meet their science and technology, we would be in awe. It would look like a miracle to us. Just the way that Moses in the Old Testament, the biblical story, he was convinced that God exists by seeing the burning bush that was never consumed. And today you can buy online a technological gadget that would have impressed Moses even more.
Yeah.
You will just put one of these gadgets, let's say a cell phone, next to Moses, and he would be obviously convinced that God exists much more than a burning bush that is not consumed. And The answer is it's because he was not aware of the science and technology that can give rise to such a thing. And so he was filled with religious awe when seeing this object that he cannot understand. And that was a miracle that convinced him that God exists. So all I'm saying is, if we see a technology that is far more advanced than we can imagine, and by the way, when I say that, I mean, we can obviously imagine the known unknowns, that there are things we don't know, but we know that we don't know them. Like, for example, what the dark matter is made of. We know the dark matter is likely out there, but we don't know what it's made of. So this is a known unknown. But what I'm speaking about is not just that, but the unknown unknowns. Okay? There are things that we don't even know that we don't know.
Yeah.
And just imagine confronting or encountering something that we don't even know that we don't know. That would be like a miracle to us. And that could be in the realm of future science or technology. And if they predated us, they already may possess such things that represent our future. And for us, it would be a huge revelation. So just seeing that would, in my mind, inspire humanity and make it humble. Because in 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, said, God is dead. And that led to the century of science and technology where humans are filled with hubris, as if we are at the top of the food chain. We are perhaps the smartest that ever existed. And I think there is a need for a sense of humility that usually was provided by religions. Religions were saying there is a superhuman entity out there and you should be humbled because it's much more capable than you are. But once Nietzsche said God is dead and modern science and technology illustrated how capable humans are in creating new technologies, we lost that sense of modesty. And one way to bring it back is to meet a superhuman entity from another star.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful message. We need something to wake us up because where we're heading, it's not great. And it worries me a lot and a lot of our listeners as well, actually. So thank you for that. It's very hopeful.
By the way, if you think about Darwin's principle of the fittest survives, if we continued along the path that we have been taken, we might not survive very long because we will inflict wounds on ourselves, either in the form of viruses that are produced in the laboratories that leak out, or nuclear war, or climate change, or some catastrophe, if we are not careful enough, that would wipe us out, including AI, if you're not careful. In the big scheme of things, you might say, well, that's a pity. I really liked humans. But if you look at it from a bigger perspective, there were lots of animals on Earth that are not around anymore. They just didn't adapt properly, or they behaved in ways that did not preserve their species. And we might be one of them. And there was a huge global warming event, as I mentioned, 252 million years ago, and it wiped out 95% of all life forms in the oceans. But we survived that. I mean, there is plenty of life forms right now, including humans. The point is, a lot was lost in the history of the Earth. And even if all life forms were to get eliminated on Earth because the sun will brighten up, there are so many other planets like the Earth, and they might still have life on them. The universe doesn't really care so much about us specifically. It's our duty to behave responsibly and intelligently. One way of thinking of Darwin's principle is that those that survive, those civilizations that we might find around us, are those that were the most intelligent. They behaved in a way that is not self-destructive.
Yeah.
And if we get that message, maybe we will change our ways. That's my hope. But as you say, it could be another scenario where people go crazy. Once we realize that there is someone far more intelligent than we are, a lot of people will feel a blow to their ego. And other people will say it's doomsday, they are here to haunt us, they will try to kill. And so they would behave in ways that are irresponsible. It's possible, but I'm optimistic usually because sometimes life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's better to be an optimist.
Yeah, you're more than a scientist, Professor. You are like a guru. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that extraterrestrial life can also be non-biological. So I guess maybe living in a different dimension that we can't see. Are they among us and we can't see them?
Everything is possible, but we need evidence to support ideas. So the beauty of physics, for example, or science more generally, is that you can come up with a lot of ideas, and the human imagination is very fertile, and it's good to have those ideas. You find them in science fiction, you find them in literature, you find them in the movies. The beauty of science is you can test some of these ideas and decide if they're right or wrong. And you do that by searching for evidence, doing the experiments. Of course, there are many possibilities that you can put on the table to start with, but as Sherlock Holmes, the fictional detective, argued, you can rule out the possibilities one by collecting evidence from the crime scene, and then whatever remains must be true. And that's the way science works. And I was asked actually by a young student just a couple of days ago on a podcast, what is the thrill that I get from doing science? And I said, it's the same as staying young forever, because you just wonder about questions without giving answers to them, like the adults in the room. Those that pretend to be the adults in the room, they have answers. That includes especially politicians or clergy. They usually have an answer to any question. But the truth is that we have very few answers. The fun is to figure out the answers. And the way you figure them out, just like a kid, is by bumping into things, doing experiments. You approach the object of interest and you try to figure it out. You study it. Sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you take risks, and you have ideas that are incorrect, but it's a learning experience. We are all students of nature. The beauty of doing science is you can figure out something that nobody else figured out. That's what gives me pleasure. There was a couple of days ago a result from the Webb telescope that was published in the Astrophysical Journal, and it talked about little red dots. These are galaxies that appear very early in the universe, when the universe was 5% of its present age. And it turns out that 30 years ago, I wrote the theoretical paper with my student that predicts exactly that. And so I felt great pleasure that the thought came in my mind before the experiment provided the data, because it basically confirmed an idea that I had. And so that's what motivates me. I was always a theorist, a theoretical physicist, but the reason I led the expedition, for example, to the Pacific Ocean is because nobody else would go after the materials of this meteor. Sometimes you have to do the experimental work yourself to figure out the answer.
Absolutely. I love that science, and you're one of them, it's going towards the direction where you don't have to prove everything. You can believe in magic a little bit. And it's great because like kids, they do love to believe in magic. So their minds are open. And quantum physics now is going towards that direction. The more you know about quantum physics, the more new universes are opening in front of you. And you understand that
Exactly.
we don't know.
Yeah, and actually searching for extraterrestrials is in a way like dating. So you can decide in your mind the image of what you might find. But that's a very bad approach, because reality, nature is richer than our imagination.
Yeah.
And especially if you deal with a partner from another star, the circumstances could be very different. So my approach is not to imagine things the way Steven Spielberg imagines, or film directors, and in fact there are a few of them that work with me right now, but instead just be open-minded, agnostic, not assume anything, and just look for things that are different from familiar. I mean, we all know about birds, rocks, balloons, drones, satellites, airplanes. These are objects we have seen before, and we can just search for data that may provide evidence for things that we've never seen before. And whatever we find would be fascinating, and my guess is it will surprise us. Even if we find rocks from another star, they might have formed in a very different way than rocks in the solar system. So we should remain open-minded and just collect the data without assuming that we know the answer in advance. My advice to young people is always never pretend to be the adult in the room, because often the adults in the room don't know what they're talking about.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Loeb. And we're looking forward to your dating app coming out.
Well,
We need it, please. Many people out there.
well, there was a CEO of a company of AI that contacted me in recent weeks and said that they are making a system that will imitate specific people based on content that they find online. And so they created a system that behaves just like Joe Biden or just like Donald Trump for the debate that took place. And he asked me if they can do it for me. And I said, go ahead, be my guest, because it would help me. I could send this system to podcast interviews and it will save me time for my research. So we should see how good the system is. And I invite you, once it comes out, you should try and interact with it. Maybe that's the app that you're looking for.
Maybe, yeah. We'll try again. We'll have a second episode with your clone, I guess. AI generated.
Avatar, yes.
Avatar, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Loeb. It's been such an honor having you on our podcast. It's very inspiring, and good luck with your work.
Thank you so much. It was very enjoyable to me as well. And I'll keep you
Great.
posted. Hopefully next year
Please.
we'll have exciting results.
Amazing. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, guys, we've made it, the end of season 1, and what better way to finish than talking about aliens potentially saving us from our own mess? Huge thanks to Professor Avi Loeb for taking us on this wild interstellar ride. If you're craving for more cosmic insights, be sure to check out Avi's essays on Medium at avi/loeb.medium.com. And if you feel like helping humanity discover ET life, support his Galileo project at Harvard by visiting projects.iq.harvard.edu/galileo/fund/US. But wait, this might be the last episode of the season, but we are already recording for season 2. We want to hear from you. Got a guest idea or burning topic you want us to explore? Aliens, fast fashion, degrowth, maybe just a conspiracy theory or two. Slide into our DMs or drop us an email. We love your ideas as much as our morning golden lattes. This podcast series is produced by Against the Tide Films. To learn more, head over to againstthetideFilms.com. If you want to help keep this solar-powered, women-led podcast going, you can donate via PayPal or snag one of our t-shirts. Links in the episode description. You can even buy us a coffee or a golden chai latte, because trust me, we need the caffeine to keep uncovering the mysteries of the universe. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and set a reminder so you're ready for the first episode of season 2. It's gonna be even wilder, I promise. Thank you for tuning in, Climate Warriors. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, keep looking up at the stars, and keep fighting the good fight. This is Lisa Camillo signing off. Take care till season 2, and remember, the future is ours to shape.